A big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. If you need a website or a domain, go to squarespace.com/James for 10% off your first purchase. Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all well. I am just reviewing some of the photos that I took yesterday, and the bad news is that they are at best mediocre. At worst, they are completely shit. Yeah, you might remember last week I was moaning about my back pain and how I couldn't go out to take photos because I had said back pain. Luckily for me, that's been completely alleviated this week, and as such, I went out to take photos. But I think I'm a bit rusty because I've been out of the game for a couple of weeks. And yeah, I just couldn't seem to take a good photo. I also made a vlog of that day, but having watched the footage, I'm not going to put you through that. I think I also got a bit excited about being back out in the mountains, and again, I was talking absolute nonsense. Right, time for sandwiches, I think. So what I thought I'd do, rather than make you watch me waffle on about my lunch and look at really rubbish photos, is I want to talk about 2 or 3 photos that I got yesterday, specifically, which aren't the best photos in the world, but I think there are some interesting points of discussion within them, which will hopefully be helpful / interesting. Right, so first off, we'll kick off with this one. Now that ledge that I was talking about my lunch on, I got to the top of that and saw this lake. I have been up there before, so I knew it was there, but I saw this lake and basically just pointed my camera at it. I don't think I could go as far as to say that it was a composition. I literally saw it and went bang, with the 16mm on full frame, so it's a super wide angle. And this photo does very little for me, to be honest. Now I do have one very similar. In fact, it's basically exactly the same composition, which I think is much better. But first, the reason I think this one doesn't work is frankly that it doesn't work as a black and white photo. So I think all good photos, every single good photo in the world, could work either as a black and white or a colour photo. You should be able to strip the colour of any good colour photo and it should still be engaging without that colour. So in Lightroom, what I tend to do when I'm editing a photo, or if I'm trying to work out if a photo is worth editing, is I'll hit V and that will strip all the colour, it'll take all the saturation away, and I'll see if I think the shot is interesting. And with this example, I don't think this particular photo is all that interesting. I mean, it's all basically the same tones. There's nothing drawing my eye to any one specific point. The lake isn't particularly dark. There aren't particularly dark shadows, there aren't particularly light highlights. It's all just a bit grey. And I know it is grey at the moment, it's black and white, but hopefully you get what I mean by that. So yeah, that was one of the shots I got. This is another. And I think this is an entirely different proposition. I mean, if we put them side by side, I mean, you can see that they're slightly different compositions. In fact, they were the same composition. I've just managed to crop them both completely differently. I don't know how I've done that. These are both 4x5 crops at the minute. I shot them on a 3x2 sensor, and yeah, I've cropped them in completely different ways. How have I done that? Anyway, try and forget the crop and the slightly different exposures. I think the image on the right is an entirely different proposition from the one on the left, and it's because the lake stands out. So if I hit V on this image, as you can see, the lake is super dark in this image, and I think that makes all the difference for the photo in terms of drawing your eye in and telling a story. Now the reason the lake is darker in that photo is because I used a polarizer. So this is a case magnetic polarizer. Basically you just put a magnetic thing in the filter thread and then you can attach the polarizer like that. You don't need to screw it in every time you want to use it, and it just spins like a normal circular polarizer. Fantastic bit of kit, but this isn't about why you need a polarizer. This is about why you need a subject. Now, because I have a subject in this photo, aka the really dark lake, and you could argue that I have a subject in the photo on the left as well, but ultimately, because it kind of blends into the rest of the scene, I don't think your eye really gets drawn to it in the same way that it does the polarized shot. But because I have this subject, I can basically do anything that I want with the color. So here is an edited version of that photo, and you can see that I've gone to town with the greens and the oranges and stuff. But the reality is, if I go to hue, I could change everything and it wouldn't really have all that much of an impact on the shot. I think it still works as a photo because your eye is drawn to the black of the lake. Now if we just switch those around, so this on the right now is an edited version of the unpolarized photo, and I still don't think that this particularly works. I mean, I can play around with the colors. Let's change the hues, let's make it a bit more orange. But the reality is that my eye is not being particularly drawn to this image in the same way that it is the polarized shot. Now, there are probably enough of you watching this for some of you to disagree. Some of you will probably prefer the non-polarized shot, but I would suggest I'd put a lot of money on more people being more engaged with the polarized shot because something in the photo stands out. And in my opinion, that's the case whether it's a black and white photo, whether you have color, and actually regardless of what colors you've used. So yeah, for me personally, I'm going to use this image in this example as a reminder to myself, basically, of the importance of subject. If you don't have a subject, then you can find yourself editing all the color and all the tones and all the vignettes and all the sharpness that you like, but actually it's not going to make a difference. You can't edit a bad photo into a good photo, and you can tell what is a good photo just by stripping back all the editing and all the color, because it should work even at its barest bones. Anyway, speaking of colour, the other thing that I wanted to talk about today, other than subject, was colour. Specifically, greens. Now, I love greens, I love editing greens, and not all greens are the same. There are millions of different greens. And I find that you can use different greens differently to convey different emotions. So for example, I find that dark greens can give you a feeling of space and emotion and solitude and loneliness and mood. And with a photo like this that I got yesterday, those are the kinds of emotions that I want to create with an image like this. Obviously, I'm in the middle of the mountains, there's a footpath, there's nobody else around, there's a bit of a moody sky. Greens can really help bring out those feelings, accentuated by what's actually in the photo. And it's the same with these photos that I stuck on my Instagram the other day that I took in Norway. So the greens give you that feeling of space and just, yeah, I suppose loneliness, like solitude, mood, all the things I said before. Exactly the same thing. The thing is though, green or dark green, what we consider a proper green, is rarely comforting. It's really soft, it's really warm. And sometimes, just because a scene is in nature, it doesn't mean you don't want to make it feel warm and soft and comforting. And whenever it's the case that I want to do that, create an image that evokes those emotions, green is typically where I start with my edit. So here is an example of a photo that I took yesterday that I'd like to make feel sort of warm and soft and ethereal and comforting and mystical. Is that enough words to describe what I'm going for? And as such, what I'll probably do is start with my preset High Key Dreamy. Something like that. There we go. Now I need to make adjustments to the white balance. Something like that. That'll do. And I'll bring down the texture a bit more, bring down the clarity a bit more, bring down the dehaze just a touch to try and give that feeling of softness, I suppose. Now these greens are a little bit yellow anyway, so if we're in hue, if I go to orange, I can make these greens an awful lot greener just by changing the hues, something like that. But that feels a bit cold to me, and if it was a moody day, if it was like a really foggy, dark, rainy day, then somewhere like this I would probably want to play on those greens because they would give the feeling of mood that I was talking about before. But given that it's quite a bright, punchy day, I don't think that's really going to cut it. I don't think the leaves, the colour of the leaves and the foliage currently sits well with the feeling of the image given what the conditions were. So what I'm going to do instead in terms of hues is I'm going to move the oranges all the way to red, I'm going to move the yellows all the way to orange, and I'm going to move the greens all the way to yellow. And straight away, I think, this gives the photo a feeling of warmth that it was missing before, obviously because I've used much warmer colours. Now I'd suggest I still need to do some tweaking to this, so I'm probably going to crop to get rid of the sky, something like that. And I think I could be a little bit more aggressive with the colour. So in terms of greens, I could boost the saturation a bit, maybe the yellows as well, maybe the oranges, something like that. But for the purpose of this is the direction that I would want to head with this photo, because I want a feeling of warmth and mystique and stuff, not cold, dark mood. Now, some people get very upset about the prospect of changing colours in this way, particularly greens. People get very protective about greens because they see it as unnatural, they see it as a step too far, they see it as not photography. But for me, photography, all photography, is art. And so I don't mind things like editing, and people that moan about it tend to be the kinds of people who don't seem to realise that things like using focal lengths, using long exposures, utilising things like depth of field to create images that are different from what human eye sees, they don't see that as editing. But for me, the bottom line is, if you're making changes like this, whether it's in post or before you actually take a photo, if you're making creative choices to distort a scene, the vision of that scene, then I'm all for it. And for me, there's no difference between doing it in post and doing it before you take a photo with things like filters and creative settings changes. And as you can see, I've chosen to go the same way with colour when it comes to this little shot of a robin that came to visit me when I was taking photos of that little derelict hut. Very cute little thing. I didn't have my telephoto on my camera, unfortunately, and I couldn't get to it because the robin was really, really close to where my bag was, so he would have just flown off. That was a bit of a shame. But this, I don't know, I quite like this with the yellows and the oranges. Yeah, finally, a big thank you to this week's video sponsor, Squarespace. So Squarespace is an amazing online platform for hosting your photos online. So we take all this time to try and take the best photos we possibly can, and being able to share them in high resolution where they'll look fantastic on any device is paramount as far as I'm concerned. And that's where Squarespace fits the bill perfectly. So Squarespace makes the process of getting your images online completely seamless, and they also have fantastic tools for hosting your images in the form of prints and books or anything that you want to put in an online store without having to know any technical info or coding or anything like that. It's fantastic. And I've used Squarespace for years and I absolutely love it. And thank you also to everyone who's let me know what they'd like to see in a monthly newsletter from me going forward. That will also be powered by Squarespace, and I'm going to start that in the next couple of days. And so if you'd like to try out Squarespace for yourself, whether it's for an online portfolio or an online store, then go to squarespace.com, start your free trial. And after that, if you'd like to make a purchase, then go to squarespace.com/James for 10% off that first purchase. And next week, hopefully I'll be back outside and I'll be talking more sense than I did yesterday. We'll see.